Good morning. We're back again with the Honorable Judge P. Scott Neville of the Illinois Supreme Court, and we're going to start our discussion. We're going to review, as I said before, we're going to review some of the bar associations. You may ask the question, how is the Alliance different from the Chicago Bar? Well, the Alliance is different because you have people of color participating to a large degree. What do I mean? Well, the Cook County Bar, the oldest African American bar association, is part of the Alliance. But so is the Asian American Bar Association. Once again, a bar association made up of people of color. But it's not just the Cook County Bar and the Asian Bar. You have the Puerto Rican Bar. That bar is also a member of the Alliance of Bar Associations. Sexual orientation has also become very important in today's society. The Gay and Lesbian Bar is also a part of the Alliance. Gender is important in our society today. Black women lawyers are a part of the Alliance of Bar Associations. But not only black women lawyers, but white women lawyers are members of the Alliance. Now, I didn't say that white lawyers should not participate. While we have a lot of bar associations with people of color, we also have some white bar associations. The largest bar association in the state, the Illinois State Bar Association, is also a member of the Alliance. The Decalogue Society, Jewish lawyers, are also members of the Alliance. I think the Hellenic Bar, the Greek lawyers, are also a member of the Alliance of Bar Associations. Now, I ask you the question. Which bar or which entity is going to give you the fairest evaluation? An entity like the Chicago Bar, made up primarily of white bar associations, or an entity like the Alliance of Bar Associations, which I refer to as the United Nations of Bar Associations, which is composed of a lot of different groups and, more importantly, people of color. Now, the other thing that is so important in the Alliance is the bar associations don't take a vote and the vote of the majority controls. What happens is exactly what I do with my cases. I have that motto that no person should be unseen and no person should be unheard. Each bar association gets to give you its own personal evaluation of that judge in the Alliance. The Asian Bar Association expresses their opinion. The Puerto Rican Bar Association expresses their opinion. Black women lawyers express their opinion. The Cook County Bar expresses their opinion. The Chicago Council of Lawyers, they express their opinion. The Decalogue Society. Then the burden is on you to look at all the evaluations, to do your own checking, and to come to a conclusion about which judge thinks most like you and has earned your vote. Which judge thinks most like you so you can go cash that lottery ticket and say, I decided who's going to sit in judgment of me, the members of my family, and the people that live in my community. I don't think it could have been put any better. It's the right to vote is a lottery ticket that you must cash. And if you don't complain.
Right. So one quick question. The Alliance, the review that the Alliance comes out with, is that accessible online?
It is.
Or what's the website?
It is accessible online.
Okay.
What you will see, though, is just the conclusions reached by the bar associations. The underlying information that they use to arrive at that conclusion, you may not be able to get it, but that's why the burden is on you. But keep in mind, before the bar associations and the Alliance make a decision, they first of all have two or more investigators do an investigation of the judge. Next, there's an interview of the judge, and then the various bar associations make a decision about what kind of rating they're going to give the judge. Usually the ratings are recommended or not recommended, or qualified and not qualified. Some bar associations have a highly qualified but all bar associations don't do that. If the bar association did not participate in the investigation, in the interview, they will not evaluate at all. They'll just have an asterisk saying we did not have an opportunity to evaluate that person. But that is one way to check. Of course, another way to check is to check the newspapers. You see, they generally have summaries about a judge's career. Another place to check for people who are running for the first time for lawyers, you might check with the ARDC and see if there have been any complaints about the lawyer who wants to become a judge. There are just a number of ways. If you're talking about judges, you might check with the Judicial Inquiry Board. If a case has gone to completion, they might have some information on the judge that you might be able to use. But there are a number of different sources. You know, today in this world of technology, if you Google the judge, you can probably find some information. There are just an infinite number of sources, and you can avail yourselves of them. If you have a telephone, just Google the judge. Put the judge's name in or the lawyer's name in and see what kind of information is online about that judge. But you have a responsibility to conduct your own investigation. As I said, you should be like citizens from Missouri. Say, show me. Ask candidates to show you if you attend forums. Ask them why they think they're the best qualified. If you have some question about something they've done, ask questions. That's the very purpose for those forums, so that you can inform yourself and make intelligent decisions when you vote for the judges. Because remember, at the end of the day, you're more likely to appear before a judge than you are between a city councilman or a mayor, between a state legislator or a governor, between a congressional person or the President of the United States. There's a high likelihood that you may appear before a judge. Exercise your right to vote. As Urel said, it is the lottery ticket that you have not cashed.
But so in other words, Judge, it sounds to me like you're saying that we need to change our mindset, and when it comes to thinking about these judges and their position as heads of the courts. It seemed to me like you're telling me that you actually work for me.
That's true. I'm a public servant. I work for you. I work for the voters. Why do I say that? Because your taxes pay my salary. Your taxes fund that courtroom that I sit in. Your taxes pay for the educational programs that the Supreme Court runs for judges. You are really my employer. I work for you. I'm your boss. You're my boss. That's right. You're my boss. And you see, you tell me what it is that you want me to do when you vote. When you go and vote, that's when you express your opinion. If I have not performed, then you vote for somebody else.
That's right.
If I perform to your satisfaction, then you vote for me.
Yes.
But remember, you're right. You got it right. The voters are our bosses. They make all the decisions at the end of the day. Now remember, once you vote and once you come in the courtroom, well then that's my courtroom.
Right.
But before I get to the courtroom, the voters decide. The voters are the bosses. The voters are taxpayers who determine who sits in those courtrooms.
So basically, with that kind of authority that we have prior to you getting to the bench, we could change it all.
You could. You could change everything. And see, that's the great thing about the system in the state of Illinois. Voters get to decide who the judges are. Now, that's state court. When we talk about the federal system, which is a separate court system, the president gets to decide who the judges are. Citizens, we prefer the state system where we get to decide. We don't want the president or anybody else making decisions about who's going to sit in judgment of us. Isn't that a great system where you get to decide who sits in judgment of you? But remember, not only are you the bosses of the judges, you're the bosses of the legislators, you're the bosses of any public official, of the city councilman. You're the mayor's boss. You're the bosses of the city councilman. the taxpayers really determine who sits in judgment of them, who governs the city or the state that they live in, and who governs the country. You know, we're getting ready to have a presidential election. You get to determine who's going to be sitting in the White House. Cash that lottery ticket.
So the first step is to change our mindset. And once we change our mindset, we understand who we are in this equation.
And you see, what we need to understand is how much power we have. See, the vote is power. If we put all of our votes together collectively, that's our power. You have power. Remember, every voter is a separate power system. I'm going to repeat that. Every voter is an individual power system. What you want to do is use the power you have along with your neighbors and everybody else to determine how the city, the state, the judiciary runs. Exercise your power. You are not powerless. That vote gives you power on election day. You are only powerless if you don't exercise your right to vote. See, everybody's got power. Everybody doesn't use their power. And that's what we fail to do. We fail to understand how powerful we are. Not individually, but collectively, we have a lot of power. You know, there's been a study recently, and I've been reading a lot, and they've been saying that black women are going to determine who becomes president of the United States. Why? Because they exercise their right to vote. Because they go to the polls and they vote. You've got to exercise your power. You've got power that you just don't realize that you have.
Wow, that statement in itself is powerful. We have to. Wow, this is amazing, man. And I want to thank you again for sharing this information with us, because hearing it come from you makes a difference. These are things that I think subconsciously we all know and we understand, but sometimes it takes a certain person or someone with certain status to come to speak the truth to us and give us a whole nother burst of energy to get out and make these changes. And I do believe that you possess that kind of energy. And I want to thank you again for coming out and speaking with us.
Well, as a public servant, I'm just informing my employers about the power that they have. I mean, truth be told.
Yeah.
See, I would not be sitting on the Supreme Court if you hadn't elected me to the Circuit Court and the Appellate Court. But it was because you exercised your power that you put me in a position where I can come in here today and explain to you how I got there. I could not have gotten to the Supreme Court without your vote. I will not remain on the Supreme Court without your vote.
Yeah.
So you have to understand that. Now, when he talks about how important this issue is to me, let me share something with you. I'm a student of history, and I was listening to the sermon that Dr. Martin Luther King gave the night before he died. And during that sermon, he talked about a man who was stranded on the side of the road. And he said that this man was on his way to Jericho, and he became ill, and he's lying on the side of a road, and another man on his way to Jericho saw the man lying on the side of the road, and he asked himself the question. He said, if I help that man, what will happen to me? Dr. King informed the people during the sermon that the road to Jericho was a dangerous road. So if you stop, the highwayman might get you. So he said the next man who came down the road was a priest. And he too said, if I help that man, what's going to happen to me? And of course he walked past him. He said, but the third man was the Good Samaritan. And he said the Good Samaritan saw the man, and he reversed the question. He didn't ask, if I help him, what's going to happen to me? He asked the question, if I don't help him, what's going to happen to him?
Right.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's why I'm here preaching and explaining to you how much power you have. The question is not what's going to happen to me if I lose the election. The more important question is what's going to happen to you if I don't come and inform you that you have the power to decide who's going to sit in the seat. Yeah. You've got the power. It's not what's going to happen to me. The question is, if the people running don't come out and tell you what's going to happen to you if you don't exercise your right to vote, then that alone should say, who's interested in me? I'm interested in you. I'm more interested in you than I am in myself. It's not what happens to me. It's like the Good Samaritan. If I don't help you, what's going to happen to you?
Well, that wraps that up. That wraps that up. And that's a great analogy. I think that's an awesome way of putting things.
And that's a part of demystifying the whole court system, the judges, the levels of the courts, the different types of courts. And so taking that and moving a step further, the sub-circuits and how the importance of that being implemented helped us individually as a community and affected our daily and how it affects our daily lives.
No question.
Well, first, explain the whole terminology, the sub-circuit.
Let me see the diagram. You see, what we have to understand is there's a three-tier judiciary. There's the circuit court at the bottom, then there's the appellate court, and there's the Supreme Court. Another way to look at it is one judge makes the decision at the circuit court level, 3 judges make the decision at the appellate court level, and 7 judges make the decision at the Supreme Court level. Now, what you need to understand is there are approximately, let's say, anywhere between 875 and 900 circuit court judges. In Cook County, the judges are elected by county. In the 1990s, a group of legislators, and I think it's so important for me to mention their names. We're talking about Anthony Young. We're talking about Paul Williams. We're talking about Senator Howard Brookins. We're talking about Senator Miguel DeValle. They decided that the bench was not diverse. What do we mean by diversity? It was not made up of people of color, white people, people with different sexual orientations, people of a different political persuasion, Democrats and Republicans. They wanted a diverse judiciary. So they knew if judges were elected countywide, that is, you count every vote in the county, the Democrats had the majority in the county, so they would determine who all the judges were. They cut the county up into 15 sub-circuits. By dividing the county up into 15 sub-circuits, it permitted a smaller group of voters to decide who the judges were. The way the initial legislation was drafted, there were 4 black sub-circuits, 2 Latino sub-circuits, and 9 white sub-circuits. As a result of electing people from the sub-circuits during the first 10 years, in the year 2000, Tim Evans was elected chief judge of the circuit court. That never would have happened if we had continued to elect judges countywide. By electing judges from the sub-circuits, Chief Judge Evans had enough votes when he went to the election to be elected, and I think it's 6 or 7 times he's been elected chief judge. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this once again is a demonstration of your power. You elected the judges in the sub-circuits. The judges in the sub-circuits elected Tim Evans. All of these things run hand in hand. But it began when the legislators in the legislature had the vision to say, we've got to divide the county up so that we have a more diverse judiciary. Just so you know how I feel, my feeling, and I think it's the belief of many of my colleagues on the Supreme Court, We believe that we should have a judiciary which one day reflects society. What do we mean? We are hoping that one day any person, regardless of race, creed, or color, or ethnicity, or social persuasion, or social orientation, will be able to take a look at the entire judiciary and see someone who is a mirror of himself. That is the goal of the judiciary. But that's the way a democracy is supposed to work. Everybody's supposed to be given an opportunity to participate. That's what the subcircuits were designed to do, to create or increase diversity. They've increased diversity. Not only have they increased diversity on the circuit court, but we now have had a black chief judge for the last 20, going on 21 years. This is the kind of thing you can do if you exercise your right to vote, if you cash that lottery ticket that you have not cashed. You can't win if you don't play. If you don't play, you can't win. So if you want to win, you got to play. And it's not that difficult. It's raining out today, but you got to go and vote. And remember, there's a 2-week period before Election Day when you can go and vote. So I can understand that you might be tied up on Election Day, but the 14 days prior to Election Day, get up and go vote. And remember, the people sitting here have reminded me that I work for them.
That's right.
I work for them. So I'm going to have to leave my breakfast and go to work because my employees are sitting here. I'm going to have to go to work.
Well, thank you again for joining in with us. And we hope that you found this information to be pertinent, to be important, to be valid. Because the things that were said today are true. It's just flat out the truth. And so we'll see you again. We'll have another breakfast. We'll have more information. And not only that, the judge has promised us that he will have some of his colleagues at our next breakfast. And so we'll get a different perspective from judges from other benches, right?